By April 14th, President Joseph R. Biden had announced the withdrawal of US troops from Afghanistan. This was news that struck out loudly throughout the world. We know of the turmoil that has engulfed Afghanistan in perpetuity. However, recently, it has reached a flashpoint which was thought to be inconceivable by many, and as a result, it was a major highlight in all news channels. But to understand the recent happenings, we need to look back and understand how we have reached here in the first place. Afghanistan has a long and winded history. However, we will be focusing on a time frame that starts from the moment America steps foot into Afghanistan to the moment they leave. Initially, the Americans reach Afghanistan with the motive to kill or capture Osama bin Laden, who was the mastermind of the September 11, 2001 attacks, as well as the head of the Al-Qaeda network. The Taliban offered surrender was rejected by the then President George W. Bush, and they defeated the Taliban as a result and stayed there, propping up the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. The rationale of the Americans staying back in Afghanistan was due to the fear of the return of Taliban and in association other like-minded groups, which would spread havoc in not only America but other parts of the world as well. Therefore, the US military established a base in Afghanistan ever since 2001 for the security that they desired. However, this finally came to an end on 30th August 2021 after 2 decades. President Biden justified the departure of American troops from Afghanistan by stating that the war wasted $2 trillion. Soon enough, the demoralized and unorganized Afghan armed forces crumbled to the Taliban like dominoes. The world watched in shock as the Taliban took over vast parts of Afghanistan and finally captured Kabul. This blow was hastened by the fact that the Afghan president Ashraf Ghani had fled the country, taking with him millions of dollars and other assets. The nations around Afghanistan were confronted with the reality of a Taliban-governed Afghanistan once again. Afghanistan, on the virtue of being on the crossroads of South Asia and Central Asia, has now developed into a major security threat to all its neighbors. However, we often forget the main stakeholders of this issue, the Afghani people, who have suffered brutality on year's end. The Afghani people woke up to a new Afghanistan where their women could not be educated nor get a job, where ethnic minorities such as the Hazara were persecuted because of their faith. However, despite all this, the Taliban claim that they have been reformed. The Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid promises an inclusive government at a press conference on August 17th. The Taliban promised to provide right to women to choose a husband, the right to education for women, and also protect civil and political rights of all citizens in exchange of an all-Afghan inclusive government, within this group's interpretation of Sharia law. These rights are believed to be brutally suppressed by militant Islamist groups. Surprisingly, however, this new benevolent Taliban has some takers, especially China. The Chinese officials began 2 days of talks with a delegation of Taliban leaders in Tianjin, a coastal city in northeastern China, significantly raising the group's international stature after steady military gains that have taken advantage of the withdrawal of American as well as NATO combat forces from Afghanistan. Mind you, this is before the Taliban took over Kabul. The Chinese foreign minister went so far as to say that the Taliban is a pivotal military as well as a political force, but urged their leaders to hold high the banner of peace talks, according to a statement by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Taliban in response is pulling no stops. They have started eliminating the Uyghur militants that are found in the surrounding areas of the borders between Afghanistan and China. Moving south to the Himalayas, the stand of India was of solidarity with the Afghans. Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar on 13 September has said that India will stand with Afghans in the time of crisis as they did in the past. Jaishankar remarked that the international community must stand together and help each other. The situation was addressed in a virtual meeting at the UN high-level meeting on the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan. Jaishankar also added that India has constantly supported a central role of the global body in the future of the war-torn country. To further understand the complex situation that is evolving in Afghanistan, we will now hear the thoughts and opinions of Professor Shrikant Paranjpe, the former head of the Department of Defense and Strategic Studies of Savitribai Phule Pune University, who is also a renowned international relations scholar.
There are 2 or 3 issues about Afghanistan which have been raised. Let me take some of these issues together and some separately. Let me first spell out what I would say is a baseline on which my analysis of Afghanistan is likely to be really structured. My understanding of Afghanistan is that Afghans as a country are a plural entity. You have a lot of ethnic groups who are fiercely independent or autonomous, if you prefer that word. The Westerners usually look at them as tribal warlords or tribal groups. I would not use the word tribal here. They have traditionally been autonomous. They have traditionally, over a period of several centuries, also been Islamic. They come together under the umbrella of Islam essentially to fight extra-regional influences, interventions, or any kind of an extra-regional threat. You saw this in the history of Afghanistan since the time the British wanted to take over the control of Afghanistan way back in the 19th century, the first Anglo-Afghan war. At that time, the British were concerned about the possibility of the Tsarist Russia entering their Indian domain, or even Napoleon coming in here. The British fought 3 wars, and the Afghans consistently fought against them. Later on, it was the Soviets. Subsequently, recently, it was the Americans. Afghanistan has, to my understanding, and it can be entirely wrong, unified despite their internal differences in terms of their ethnic identities, unified under an umbrella of Islam to fight extra-regional interventions. The Taliban, or look in a slight earlier time period, when the Soviets entered Afghanistan, they intervened there.
Sir, a final question. Would there be any spillover of the effects in terms of the rule of Taliban in Afghanistan in South Asian countries, in particular India?
Well, in a sense, yes. But that spillover is not so much exclusively because what is happening in Afghanistan and the Taliban rule. It has more to do with the feeling or the kind of jubilation, perhaps, which Pakistan has of having succeeded in its efforts at establishing its own dominance in Afghanistan. So Taliban was supported by Pakistan in a big way, and the argument within Pakistan must be that this is a success of their intervention. Taliban has taken over, and that success can be repeated elsewhere. Jammu and Kashmir is an important area. So if at all there's an increased militancy, intervention, increased infiltration of terrorist groups in Jammu and Kashmir, it has more to do with this Pakistani perception that they have a success in Afghanistan and they can repeat that success here. It is, at least to my understanding, and my understanding can be totally wrong. It has nothing to do, or it has really very little to do with the Taliban rule supporting the militants or the terrorist groups who are infiltrating in Jammu and Kashmir. I would link the terrorist groups in Jammu and Kashmir more to Pakistan than to Afghanistan, and that is how I would argue. One is bound to see an increased militancy in Jammu and Kashmir, and that increased militancy is with the kind of a confidence which Pakistan apparently has in the context of its success in Afghanistan, or what it perceives to be its success in Afghanistan. And I would not be surprised if Pakistan is going to support several other militant groups in terms of their struggle for some kind of a domination, struggle for some kind of an intervention in India.
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful inputs on the situation developing in Afghanistan. On that note, we will be concluding this session. Please stay tuned into the Symbiosis College of Arts and Commerce Current Affairs Club for more such interesting topics.